Nice. All right. We'll start with a hello. How are you,
Okay.
Vidya?
Fine. How are you?
Good.
It's been an interesting week in the digital
Certainly.
world. Yeah, in the digital world at least.
Definitely. Yeah. Today especially, I kind of dedicated quite a bit of time to reading these Facebook files, and oh boy, it has definitely changed my perspective on the way that this platform works, and just even the depth of human suffering that is possible, or that exists in the world, and then that gets translated into the digital world, because that's what the world is. It's filled with suffering. So yeah, it was kind of shocking to read the way that Facebook is involved with some of these things, and yeah, so it's really kind of shaken my perspective of the thing. But what do you mean by that? Why was the week so intense for the digital world?
Well, to me, because when we look at it from a digital perspective, many people now, at least in the urbanized environment, we are all connected to the digitally, and the platforms that allow us to be connected is the social media. And among the biggest, if not the biggest, social media is Facebook. I think they have, according to stats I read, is more than 3 billion people on Facebook, and equally, or if not more, on Instagram, and many more on WhatsApp, and they all belong to Facebook, right? And Facebook went dark for a couple of hours over the last weekend, and prior to that, I think Wall Street Journal was releasing a series of news articles, which they call the Facebook files. Very interesting revelations, and somewhere along the line, the whistleblower revealed herself. And some of these articles and some of the papers that were written, that were exposed, were very, very revealing. I was not shocked. I was surprised to the extent that it was real. And I, so that's pretty big, and it's for the social community. This is unquestionably one of the very important, you can say, milestone in our whole digital evolution. And from a business standpoint, it's most shocking because in one of the articles I read, somebody just lost $600 in 5 days, in a couple of hours, because this person couldn't get her classes organized. She lost contact with the students and so on. So Facebook has become a integral and important part of our lives, of many people's lives, right? So yeah. So this is important, and being very involved in the digital world, this is a big thing, and I'm watching this very, very closely, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is that we're not just involved, but actually dependent in the instance of that person who lost money. People, like I was reading articles, people's businesses are entirely based on one, taking orders through WhatsApp and then fulfilling orders through Facebook, and it's a social infrastructure much more than just a media sharing platform. And I mean, I think there's a lot of structural issues with that. One, internally, because it's actually all centralized. So there's if the system goes down, the whole thing goes down. But two, we're really dependent on kind of Zuckerberg's empire for not only our deep elements of our social life, but even our economic lives. And I don't know, there's something about being what's the word, kind of almost self-reliant, that it's almost paradoxical, because Facebook does actually enable a lot of that. You can build your own business and have it on Facebook, but you're still dependent on that realm. So I guess awareness needs to be brought to this interdependence of our lives through the platform, and how, maybe it isn't really the safest place to have our ground. It isn't a very stable ground. Yeah.
I agree with you on most part. Just that the part of infrastructure, I think Facebook or social media is more than infrastructure. It has become ecosystem, right? So it's a ecosystem that we depend on,
Yeah.
right? What I want to share is this. I think today, in the cover page of Time magazine, we have, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's Mark Zuckerberg, and with a right in the middle, the cover face, and we have a little command at right in the middle. It says delete Facebook, cancel, delete, make a choice, right? So I think there's a lot of reaction to the situation, and I believe that this whole situation is not black and white or black or white situation. It's not a situation about deleting or keeping. From the civil society perspective and from our perspective, as the digital Bodhisattva perspective, it's what do you call this? We need to keep to a kind of a middle way, right? And what is the middle way? I mean, middle way is sometimes, in our communities, we say it's overused, passe word, right? Okay. But it is, it reflects a situation where the world has embraced digital communications and ecosystem to a point of normality. Okay, so what we need to do is really to understand, have a sense of the world that we live in, this whole digital world, and know how to make use of it. Right. So in the one of the Facebook papers, when it talked about what do you call this, slavery? What do you call it? What's the word for it?
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking, right? Okay. So
Yep.
there's this lady who was duped into to a job in Saudi Arabia. It turned out to be a kind of slavery. She worked multiple hours, paid very little. When she wanted to resign, she wanted to quit. She was forced to pay a certain amount of money, right? And it was the same platform that helped her. So she took her problem to Facebook, onto Facebook, and through Facebook she connected with legal advice, friends, connections, civil societies, and it finally pressured the employers, so-called employers that took her from Kenya to Saudi Arabia, to say, okay, waive, you don't have to pay anything, you can go back, fine.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we cannot hate. It's not a love-hate relationship. It's going to be here. It's here all the time, right? So we need to understand this so that we can, from the Buddhist perspective, from the digital Bodhisattva perspective, how do we rise above the world of digital mud, so in the manner of speaking, right? So there's this analogy of the Buddha as the lotus rising above the mud. So we need to rise above this whole digital, what do you call this, fight, whether it's good, whether it's bad, my opinion is that social media like Facebook and many others, or should I say especially Facebook, amplifies human nature. It amplifies the situation around today. Human trafficking did not start on Facebook. It is already happening, and there was a dimension of now global, amplification, right? Hate speech, extremism, violent extremism did not appear because of Facebook. It was already there. Facebook somehow, the way this works today allow this to be amplified, and it has split and separated society. and communities. So I think we need to really understand this whole situation. Then the other thing, while we try to understand this, we also need to understand that this is, if you look at the long-term scheme of things, these are the infancy steps of a digital world, right? If you look at yourself maybe 50 years from now, okay, this whole environment, it may be different. It may be different. Okay, some will say it is utopian, some has a dystopian view, but I think it's an evolution. There is pressure now to to make changes. Okay, and what we are seeing is they are being pressured to make changes, to make the platform better. Okay, right. Yet there's this balance of how do we make it better, but maintain the elements that make money for Facebook, right? You're talking about 60-70 billion dollar revenue, annual revenue. So this is a challenge for the company itself. Remember, this company is less than 20 years old, I think, right? And
Yep. 17.
yes. So you're talking about a CEO who's fresh out of college, you know. So I think we probably need to allow some level of space, for it to evolve. Yet we need to know how to intervene to be part of the evolution. Yeah. So I mean, talking from a big
Absolutely.
picture perspective. So it's not hate, not love, it's there. So what do we do? What do we need to do, right? So we need to go down to what we are doing now. What are the problems we need to address? There are conflict issues in Myanmar. There is inter ethnic conflict in certain parts of the world, and so on. And in some cases, it's fueled by the social media. In some cases, social media can be used to overcome that. So how do we work with this dynamic environment? I think that's the question we really need to ask when we are, talking about a Bodhisattva perspective of a digital environment. So
I
yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
Yeah. However, yeah, I mean, and I say however almost to be a devil's advocate, but in reading, especially that piece about the human trafficking, one thing stuck out to me about, of course, I was part of my process here was I was realizing, oh right, human trafficking exists. Uh, it existed before Facebook. It will exist after Facebook, but it can happen on Facebook, and it's facilitated by Facebook. But crucially, Facebook makes money off of advertisements that
yes,
human trafficking groups give to Facebook. They make a lot of money, in fact, and it's not just human trafficking. It's the drug cartels. It's all of the nefarious things that go on and are promoted on these platforms. Facebook is actually not a neutral because they're profiting, and they profit big time off of all of this, which makes me. I want to transcend the kind of dualistic frame of good and bad, but that is very bad. The fact that they will actually make money off of these things and then be slow to respond. They'll kind of fix their policies in order to make sure that the engagement of their platform isn't hurt if they do too much censoring, and like that in my mind is extremely unjust, and
and
it's disturbing.
yeah, I think that's this is the I think this is the point, right? We need to how do we deal with this? Should we deal with this in itself, or do you want to blame or point towards the economic, capitalist business capitalist approach that some people will point towards that way? If you are not on Wall Street and you are not pressured to make money, your prices are not up there, to maintain growth, right? Then you probably won't have this problem. So I think this whole interdependence thing is we need to look at it, from this perspective. Then on the other hand, while we are looking at um, Facebook, as a very powerful social media that seems to facilitate not very good activities, okay, they're also afraid of other forces. Yeah, right. So one of the things that they came up very strongly was when Apple found out about some of these practices, right? I think it's one of the papers. It immediately, threatened. Okay, if I remember the article, Facebook to change, right? Otherwise, Apple would threaten to remove Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp from their Apple App Store, and that's huge. They will lose billions of users overnight. Okay, so again, there are other forces, right? Okay, beyond just the civil society and so on. Okay, so I think we need to learn how to live with it and work with it to some extent. We can't control the algorithm that is being being tested. New algorithm to test this, remove likes, remove share buttons, and they're just testing. So we need to be aware that um, that this is happening. So I think we need to take our foot off the pedal of the social media and focus on the work at hand, in the sense that what are we trying to do to help society and
Absolutely.
to be engaged, and how do we use the tools that are available effectively, the digital tools effectively. So this is the questions we really need to ask, and we need to huddle and find solutions. And don't be dependent on the on the social or the digital platform. So we have to look at it from a very real world perspective, and how would real world react. And it is possible, if we put our heads together and figure out something, I'm sure human ingenuity and innovation will come out with some things. Let me share one story with you. This is Malaysia, 1947. Okay, 10 years before we had our independence, and there were the grassroots movement that pushed for a people's constitution versus the elitist politicians that's negotiating a constitution with the British colonial masters, right? And they wouldn't, of course, the elite would not listen. The British would not listen. In 1947, Malaya at that time, Malaysia was Malaya, organized a huge nationwide strike. They could effectively get the message to the entire country, and everyone stopped. The bus driver stops, the taxi driver stops, the shops close. Word spread. Okay, so I think if there's a will, there was way, and there was no social media to go and tell people, yeah, please shut down your store. And this is the whole country, mind you, in those days, right? 1940s. To travel up and down the country probably take 15 hours, 12 hours by driving, maybe 20 hours. Just drive up and down the peninsula. Now it takes about maybe 10 hours. Those days we double or longer. So if we want to find a way to get what we want to do, to achieve our mission, our goals, we will find a way with the tools that we have. So I think to the civil society, we need to think beyond digital platforms. We need to go back to basics as well. We need to understand what works, and it's about human nature, reaching out to people. So how do we derive strategies today that work with technology rather than working on the technology itself? Okay. Yeah. So how do we do that? Yeah.
Now, it's such a good point, and it makes me think of, even like the that image of like Avalokitesvara, the like Bodhisattva of infinite compassion, and the 1,000 arms that can be used to act in a compassionate way. Some of them, in fact, quite a few of them, are holding weapons, dangerous looking like swords and blades and like poison daggers and like everything. Anything can be used in service of like a compassionate aim for greater peace. And so you're right. It isn't necessarily to transform that weapon into a flower to then use it, but to use it right and to use it like effectively without creating further harm. So yeah, I completely I resonate with what you're saying. And something that you said earlier as well, I think, was like something that I noticed in one of these articles, and it was about the teenage mental health kind of concerns that were raised internally at Facebook in terms of Instagram's effect on like teenage girls. And they made this comparison between Facebook, like current Facebook, and tactics that Big Tobacco used back in like the 1950s to kind of shade the impact that they knew their that smoking was having on lung cancer, but in terms of Facebook, the effect that algorithms based on like beauty and the body have on teenage mental health. And it was interesting that there was like the same evasive tactics being used in terms of these things. And it really made me think, okay, all right, so we're at this stage in our understanding of the way that these technologies work. And of course, the vested interests will be making tons of money off of them, but eventually these will actually evolve into something that is more healthy. And I believe that. It's a difficult time, I think. But in terms of back then, when lots of people were smoking, and it's an interesting comparison actually, because you think like you see in old videos and movies and stuff, everyone is smoking in the office, on the trains and the planes. It almost looks exactly like people today just scrolling infinitely through their phones, like everywhere they are.
True.
And it's like now you're not allowed to smoke inside certain restaurants. Like all of these things have come about because 20, 30 years down the line, there were all these impacts on people's health in terms of people dying of cancer. And like I wonder, in 20, 30 years there could be this ripple effect of health in terms of like mental health and all sorts of these things. And maybe we'll have times when the bar that you walk into is its walls are insulated so that no radio frequencies can get in, and it's like a dead zone, and like you're not allowed to use mobile technology inside because people understand it's actually bad for you to a certain extent. Or like it may not be that extreme, but it's the same kind of thing. That there will be evolutions in the way that we engage with something that everybody just loves to do. It's like it's the next big addiction, and I think that like just like then when everyone was smoking, there were some people that were saying this isn't good for you. We need to think about this. We need to think about doing this better. And eventually, those voices, they won. They kind of woke up to the reality of what was happening. But there were people there the whole time, like saying, like pointing it out, like that. And so I guess there are lessons to be learned in the sense that you can't just change people's behavior or the way that huge structural things work overnight, but you can work on yourself and address your own interaction with these kinds of things, and you can like tend to the part of the garden that you can touch. And if that's just two people in a clubhouse room, that's what it is, and that's great. But if it's hundreds of people in an auditorium, that's also great. So it's about kind of like, I think we can learn that lesson from Big Tobacco, and really like, utilize it. It was a funny thing that occurred to me, and I think it was great that they mentioned it in the article.
Yeah. I just, as you were speaking, I was just wondering, just imagining a mental health hazard label at the login page of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah, So yeah, I mean, maybe cigarette companies took how many years, and evidence after evidence that were buried, court cases, litigation, and so on, before. And they were not allowed to advertise, so there were so many rules. Like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you go to Singapore, you can't smoke indoors. You have to be outdoor, and even then it's just designated smoking zone. So
Right.
so I think that's why I mentioned about looking into the future is the evolution. And I like the analogy you pulled out just now when you talk about Avalokiteshvara, thousand arm, thousand eye, Bodhisattva, maybe holding many tools. In Buddhism, we call this skillful means. And skillful means is not just skillfully using this means, but it's also skillfully understanding this means, right? If you want to use it skillfully, we need to know we need to know it to use it. You just can't pick up a sword and say, "Yeah, I'm going to use it," right? And you can't pick up a stick. You need to know the nature of it. What are the strengths, the weaknesses? How do you use it? Do you hold it at the long end, hold it at the short end, and so on. So how do you swing to have a maximum impact to hurt? How do you move the stick to prevent hurt from happening? So I think we need to stay focused and get more awareness from this whole past week of social media excitement, and a lot of black and white, yes, no, delete, keep Facebook happening, but move the conversation to how do we understand this more, and this is evolving too. How do we find ways to intervene and be part of that evolution in a positive way, right? So really, we need to huddle. We need people who understands social psychology. We need people who to work together with people who understands algorithm, data scientists, right? And it needs to be at the core of our practice, the the compassion, the kalyanamitta, and this whole will to change things. The whole spirit of a bodhisattva is coming back. After being enlightened, in the Mahayana tradition, after being enlightened, you remain on this world to save, in a way, okay, to help people alleviate themselves, from suffering. Right? So I think that's really what we need to have, this whole narrative, this whole discussions. And we have seen a lot of Buddhist or spiritual personalities who become some kind of an influencer, very well known within social media. We need to work with them so that is we can understand and use these tools better. Right? Otherwise, it's a very easy route to be to build up your ego. Okay, once you have strong following there, you tend to be deluded that you're a great teacher, and that's the way the nature of Facebook is, right? It segments you, it keeps all the same thinking, same likes together, right? So these are the traps we need to be aware of, right? And
Yeah, I mean, if Chogyam Trungpa was alive today, he would be tearing apart the digital spiritual materialism that exists by virtue of these platforms. And I think it's so important that you bring it back to this understanding element. Like we have to understand the tools that we use before we are able to use them really effectively, and especially with like a kind of compassionate intent. And it made me, one of the major things as I was reading today, these different Facebook files and the different elements of the kind of expose that was coming out, is that Facebook itself doesn't understand itself. It doesn't understand the role that it plays globally. Like there was a couple of ridiculous statistics that I took notes of that I want to share, because they were kind of like they were stupendous in the sense that okay, let me just look them up really quick here. I've got notes of them. Okay, here we go. In 2020, Facebook employees and contractors spent more than 3.2 million hours searching out and labeling, or in some cases taking down, information the company concluded was false or misleading. The documents revealed only 13% of the were on content from outside of the United States of America. That is mind-boggling to me. Now, that that was one element. Okay, so they're only kind of trying to moderate they're only trying to gain insight into content that's like within a very small scope of the actual amount of people that use Facebook. The second one was about the language gap on Facebook, that there's so many different dialects in the world that people that use these platforms. Many of Facebook's systems, they're artificial intelligence systems that actually do the scanning of content to see if it contradicts or breaks any of their guidelines, just they're not coded to be able to read a certain dialect in the Ethiopian language. And that means that people posting on Facebook might not even know that they're breaking rules about these things. And so what this all really brought me to an understanding of is that Facebook has no idea about like really how it's being used, because oftentimes it doesn't even have the language coded into it or people employed that speak the language. And so this element of insight that I think comes when the first noble truth is suffering, right? And that there are causes and conditions for this suffering. And looking through okay, there's human trafficking. Why is there human trafficking? Okay, there's all these things. It's a process, and you gain insight through that process. And what I've noticed is that much of the suffering that Facebook is experiencing as a result of this expose is just because it has very little insight into how to effectively run itself. And of course, that's the external. That's what's happening with this platform. The work that we can do is understanding, like you said, how we can use this platform and how it engages with us in the first place. So I think there was an interesting exercise that was done as in one of these articles. Someone mentioned that it was kind of like a mindfulness exercise, in that a teenager looked at their news feed, or maybe it was the Explore or Discover tab in Instagram, for 2 minutes, and noted all of the stories that they saw, and noted all the advertisements that they saw, and noted the specific type of content that was in these advertisements. Were they like trying to sell like kind of more sexualized images, all of these things? Just doing that, you can have this kind of little mindful experiment of, okay, what does the algorithm see me as? How does the algorithm understand me as a user? And how could this algorithm, which is what controls the news feed and the content that you mostly see, how is this affecting my own perception of the world and even myself? So that there are these ways of, I think, going through that process of kind of creating a little bit of space between your experience and your reaction to it, and be use that to gain means to have a kind of identity on these social platforms.
True, very interesting. I think I like what you said about Facebook doesn't know itself. You know, I think they know itself to the extent of the mechanism that generates revenue. It's a business. It's not a social enterprise. It's not a civil society platform. It's a business, and it's a huge business, right? So they looking at the end game, the end, which is revenue, which is profits, right? Then suddenly they find themselves their product they don't understand. And you are very right. By the papers have also, the Facebook papers have also revealed that there were many initiatives, like the civic consciousness portion, the awareness of the civic duties, ethical values. There were so many suggestions, so many discussions, and studies happening, trying to understand itself. But rather, I think if you look at it from a Dharma perspective, is a good thing, right? You're looking inwards, yeah? And they are starting to come to a point that what do you call that? I think which comes first, which is more important. Do I do this that makes more money? Do I, do I put in some, ethical values around some of the processes? I think they are in that position. And this whole week has moved the needle of ethics, if you like, okay, a little bit more. And I think it's a positive move in that sense. People are watching. People are people who are concerned are aware, and I think changes will come. Okay, how fast, how soon, how big, how small, I don't know. Right, we have to rip into all the details and analyze the activities, the changes of the Facebook, what's happening, to really answer how much and how long, right? But definitely changes. It's coming. I think there is recognition that something needs to be done, right? And there are other social media platforms that take different routes. Like Snapchat, for example, have a pretty strong ethics committee or ethics division that really looks at ethical values of Snapchat, for example. And one of the things that comes out from there is that there's very little or almost no emphasis on the body. Like unlike Instagram, there are a lot of emphasis on how you look, your skin, your color. But in Snapchat, it's a deliberate effort to go towards funny, silly, your face and all that. So these are very subtle, and some of these companies are taking this cue pretty seriously. Okay, right. Twitter, I would say, in my opinion, is doing something, and they are quite open about it. The ethical values are quite strong. In fact, they are also they are even moving towards, exploring what do you call that, a more decentralized approach in managing, the whole social media, right? So where control does not go towards certain people to decide how we will interact, but it's in a more decentralized manner. And I think that experiment is quite interesting. If I recall that there's an initiative within Twitter called Blue Sky, and it's worth looking into and to understand how some of these initiatives are driving the whole digital social media platforms. Okay, so I can
Yeah.
I can imagine 10, 20 years, how is this going to evolve, right? So I like I said, this is still very kindergarten. It's a very raw tool. If you are in the age of the caveman, is a stone probably tied to a stick, as a weapon or as a
Yeah.
tool, right? So yeah, we are in very rudimental stage, and we are experimenting with algorithms that we are struggling to understand what it is, and in terms of even algorithm and data, big data analytics and so on, we are running on technology which are considerably very slow, because you look at quantum computers, probably not too far from now, it's going to be huge and really, really fast. So how do you anticipate all this? So I think it's from a technology standpoint, quite exciting, and from a social standpoint, it's equally exciting because there are now so many spaces to intervene, yeah, and to be part of this whole evolution. As long as you don't get caught into being the user, don't get caught into being the product, right? So that's the awareness, and I think from a engaged spirituality or engaged Buddhist perspective, we need to have this mindfulness of what it is, and how this thing is moving. So I mean, these are my thoughts. So I think we need to continue to have these conversations. Probably record it, share it with people, get more people to converse and discuss about this. Much more.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's one thing that's guaranteed, it's change. The only constant is change, and that there was something that they wrote in one of these articles that I actually like laughed at out loud, because they said that, so that there were all these like polls and the way that they weren't able to moderate certain content, and like all these ethical decisions were like it's too complex for them. And they were like, yeah, we're building new artificial intelligences to figure this out. And I was just like, you need actual intelligence. Like, step back from creating a new tool and just reflect and like use your inborn intelligence to understand that like a lot of these problems can be fixed if you actually just relax a little bit. Maybe take your foot off the gas. Let a certain amount of followers just leave your platform and figure it out. Yeah, it's just it gets very kind of bloated and, and overdone.
So,
But I wanted to go to this blue sky thing, or at least I've got something to say about blue sky. Unless you wanted to respond to that.
go ahead. Yeah.
I did some research into Blue Sky, and it's really interesting. And they have this website called bluesky-community.net, and it's got all these really interesting resources on it, on the left for everyone. They say, and there's like links to decentralized forms of social networking that already exist. So there's one called Mastodon, which is like Twitter. And there's one called Iris, which is like Instagram. And then there's like other tools and apps. Like there's encrypted chat rooms, peer-to-peer web browsers, like a blockchain Zoom-like video meetings. There's even like an entertainment like Netflix type thing called Watch It, and one for audio called Audius, like Spotify. So there's all these links here. I haven't actually, to be perfectly honest, I haven't clicked on them, but just seeing the little things, like descriptions, I'm like, ooh, okay. So these alternative forms, or like Web 3.0 versions of current very ubiquitous technologies, are actually they exist to a certain degree. They may be in beta stages or filled with bugs, but people are already piloting these ways of using networks, perhaps without the need for copious amounts of money to be funneled into what are essentially monopolies on our data. And so I don't know. These things are very exciting, and it's interesting to see that Twitter is kind of leading the charge, at least in terms of a super big social media platform, in trying to migrate over there in some form or another. And so I think that there's a lot of hope here, and a lot of interesting spaces to watch, and even a lot of spaces that I think like fledgling little communities like ours that are quite cutting edge, and I would say open to these exciting opportunities. I think these are things that we can explore as well, and begin to, perhaps even just explore with curiosity and see how these things could work, and if they might be actually good ways of kind of also leading a charge into these spaces with a kind of even more of an engaged spiritual approach, which may not be present in them at the current time. So I think that there's a lot of really kind of exciting opportunities in terms of where these trends are headed, that yes, they don't need to rely on you deleting Facebook and kind of jumping off the ship. You can use the material that's coming up, explore it, and continue to go deeper. And many interesting things away.
Yeah, but also it's easy to be excited. I think we should be excited about this again, and putting in perspective the scheme of things again. These are all very new, and is part of an evolution process. 20 years ago, there was no decentralized type technologies like blockchain, for example. But people have always explored and longed for very decentralized, disempowered, or shall I say more empowered communities coming together, and some of them have found ways to use technology to achieve their goals. and some communities are embracing this quite in many in interesting ways, as you've seen in Blue Sky, right? And even initiatives like may not be just technology, like Taiwan's zero government is also another very interesting uh, you know initiatives, right? So it's worth to really uh, have some mindfulness, if you like. And I'm not sure if the traditional teachers would like the way I use the term mindfulness, but of being aware of the developments around us and anticipate you're right, and we all agree that change is constant. The change, and we are reminded all the time in our practice that um, impermanence, anicca, is a inherent characteristic of things. Yeah. So, and how do we live with impermanence? How do we live with it and not be swayed by it, right? And what not to do is not to be attached to something that's permanent. That we think is permanent, and when it changes, it brings despair, it brings suffering. So let's be excited about the technologies. Let's not cling to it as the savior, or is the way out, is the best technology in the world, right? And who knows what will happen next 20 years, 50 years? There may not even be technology. The world will go back into reverse, right? So we don't know, but what we know is that we can chart. We can. I like to say this again and again. We can intervene once we understand the interconnectedness, the impermanence, the change, the nature of change. We can be part of the change. We can guide the change to something good, right? So I think we need to constantly, again, same message, push for these discussions and to find ways to intervene. It would be nice if the engaged Buddhist community have a seat in some of the AI ethics community, and have our views heard, and we hear their views and understand. So there are many ethics initiatives, AI ethics initiatives that are happening around the world, especially in the US, and and in Europe. So we should get our hands, our feet in there, right? Just as the same way we have formed organized networks like ICE, the interreligious action on climate and environment, that we are able to be present through our network at the COP meetings, at the various international meetings. The same thing, we need to also find ways to be present in all these initiatives that are coming up. I think at some point there'll be some coming together, of different forces to make things better. Right. Okay. So yeah, that's the other level we need to talk about. So I'm coming from a very, very policy type higher level, that we need to constantly come back to our personal practice, our mind. Don't be too distracted by the busyness of the social media. When we have a problem, it's so easy to just get on the screen and keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And we fear missing out on things. This happening, your friend's doing that, and I'm not there. You fear that you feel left out. I think we need to also come back to address this challenges on a very, very personal level. Okay, how do we make people use social media more mindfully? In our last discussion, we talked about the mindful. Is it a myth? Mindfulness on the social media, is it a myth, right? So I think all these things are related. We should not lose sight of our on the personal level, how things are happening, how we intervene, and have some foresight into the bigger picture and deal with it accordingly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I wanted to actually, I've been reading this book, an incredible book called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. And there was this incredible little poem in it that really struck me as a wonderful example of, well, it's kind of it applies to social media as well, I think. And it's called Autobiography in 5 Chapters. It's actually not written by him. It was written by a woman whose name I will get to at the end. But it goes like this. Number 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Number 2. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Number 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Number 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Number 5. I walk down another street. And there was something very beautiful about the way that poem made me think about the digital world. Because, okay, so the name of the author was Portia Nelson. It was quoted in a book called Healing the Child Within by Charles L. Whitfield. But yeah, the person who wrote it was Portia Nelson. And it made me just think that, like, as I engage with a social media, let's say Instagram, I kind of like, when I first started using it, it's just like, you just dive in and you're just flicking through, and suddenly you realize, oh, an hour has gone by. And you kind of like, you're pulled out of it probably by some other task that somebody demands something from you. Or you do something. And then slowly things evolve, and like suddenly, like, as you're inside of it for after 10 minutes, you realize, oh, okay, I'm here I am again. And then you kind of like, you eventually get yourself out, and then, and then after a little while, or after quite a while, in fact, in my case, I come to the point where, like, I'm about to click on the app, and I realize that I actually had no reason for going in there. My brain just automatically was about to dive down this hole, and I stop, and I just put my phone down and I do something else, and I walk down another street, and then of course a different thing happens, and like I'll get sucked into that. But I thought that poem so perfectly kind of captured what it can feel like to be sucked down, like kind of the doom scroll, or the doom scroll hole, as it were. And yeah, I don't know, it just kind of like really resonated with me, so I wanted to share it.
Oh, thank you. That was very, very beautiful and quite fitting in our discussion, because we do things and again, we wondering why we continue doing it even though it's painful. I think it's, if we put social media, technology, everything aside, again going back to basics, it's about looking inwards to our minds and what drives us. Is it fear of change? Is greater than the fear of falling to the hole, right? Then we got to deal with the fear, or is it just lack of mindfulness? We keep walking and falling the same hole time and time again. What are we doing wrong with our lives, right? And in many cases, from a practice perspective, social media forces you, to continue to do things again and again and again, and you seem to be out of control, and you reading the articles or the Facebook files, gives the impression that humans don't think. If I switch one button off, I take away the share button, humans will react this way. I put something there, a little button that try to dispel misinformation, humans will behave that way. right? I think that's the real, to me, that's the real problem. You know, we need to educate and transform ourselves. You know, to recognize this and not fall into the trap of how our environment dictates us, our digital environment dictates us, our physical environment dictates us. And if you again take away what you call this, the whole digital environment, you know, we want to understand nature around us so that we are not affected by what's happening around us, you know. And in one of the traditional, you know, the Chinese Buddhists were saying, you know, don't be swayed by the eight winds, you know, the praise and blame, you know, they do not disturb you, okay, right? The fear do not disturb you, you know, happiness do not disturb you, sadness do not disturb you. Your mind is still steadfast, right? So I think when I said in earlier part of the discussion, we say the amplification of our nature, okay, the negative part of nature, is what the biggest problem of social media like Facebook is this. It amplifies this non-thinking, lack of mindfulness aspect, right? So we need to find ways to do that. I'm not saying it's bad we totally delete Facebook, but you need to make a choice. First of all, be aware that you are zombie scrolling, right? And we got to stop, right? Okay. And then you get so upset and you know, get so disturbed because when you're working on something, someone notifies your phone beeps and someone make a posting, and you quickly run, you know, with your fingers through scrolling, and you start to multitask, and after a few things you lose your mind and you become very agitated, right? So that's what we don't want, see, right? And that's the first thing in you know, maybe we should do classes on digital mindfulness in that sense. Put the phone next to you, let it beep, and don't turn your head. Right?
Right.
Okay. And beep, don't move your finger. You know. So I think this is, we need to go against the grain in that sense, and it's really challenging because the way we are educated, the way we have been brought up is so triggered by externalities, right? And the deeper manifestation of this is, I like this kind of clothes, you know, things you buy, you resonate with, you know, you relate with certain personalities. You are not you anymore, right? So again, back to very basics is search within yourself, you know, and understand yourself, not be a product of what's the environment, digital and physical environments wants you to be, but how do you be yourself? Right. So I think that's the question we need to keep hammering it in, you know, and in life was much easier those days when there are less media, you know, and it's easier to practice mindfulness. That's why people go to the forest, you know, and move away distractions. But you're in the city, you know, you're distracted by so many things. And distraction is the main thing because distraction allows uh, engagement. It allows stickiness to the platforms. When stickiness is there, revenue is generated. So it runs counter to a lot of the principles that we work for. How do we unravel this, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a vortex of samsara inside of those algorithms. They're like samsara producing machines. It's like their entire goal is to keep the mind in this deeply engaged state of like, yeah, it's just it's very that's why it's a fertile ground for practice in that sense. Like if you are able to run, I think that's an excellent exercise, a great idea. If you could run a little workshop even at a conference for 5 minutes, where you know you say I don't know, everybody is added to the same group chat, and the the person who's leading the exercise says, okay, I want you to close your eyes or put your phone in front of you and like look out ahead of it, like the kind of like you would in Zazen. Like you keep your eyes kind of half open, half closed, but you keep your phone like, within peripheral view almost. And then the exercise is just don't look. Like just don't look. And then it becomes a kind of like don't imagine a white elephant thing, which is like that classic neuroscience thing where like you have to imagine a white elephant if somebody says it. But I think, and there are obviously ways of refining that to be a little more delicate. But that would be an excellent exercise, because what most retreat experiences are like, or just meditation exercises, like turn your phone off, put it in this tray, and we'll throw it away. We'll put them in the other room. It's like, but maybe you're actually creating this kind of false separation between the fact that your phone is always in your pocket or right next to you. And if you're actually going to be able to maintain a consistent and deepening practice, you're going to need to integrate that device into it. And it's a little bit unnatural, actually, to remove your phone from this situation. Of course, humans weren't born with phones, but nowadays they practically are. So, we need to be able to evolve these kinds of things to incorporate what is, in a sense, just an extension of our mind. That's really what the phone is. Like, in a personal sense, I know that the way that my memory works is deeply affected by the fact that I have the internet at my fingertips almost all the time. Like, I'll know that I don't need to remember specific information. All I need to remember is a keyword to search in Google, which will give me the information almost immediately. And so my mind creates this, in psychology, it's called a heuristic, like shortcut. I don't need to waste memory space on remembering the details of that baseball game that I went to, or this person's date of birth, or when this event happened. All I need to know is the detail of what the event is called. And then within 15 seconds, I can have all the information that I needed, even much clearer than I would have been able to remember. So to this extent, our phones and these devices are a deep extension of our minds in the world. And to be able to relate to that extended aspect with like the quality of sati, being able to cultivate that in terms of this extended realm of awareness, is, I think, extremely important for the world that we live in now. Because otherwise, we get overwhelmed very quickly, and we do get overwhelmed very quickly. So I don't know. I think designing a kind of workshop would be very eye-opening to try something like that, and I think that it's definitely something we should attempt.
Yeah, let's see. Whoever listening now, we probably put the recording out, so it's just the two of us, and which Zazen teacher would start this, and enter the Zendo with your phones on high volume. Fine,
right? And you have to join these three WhatsApp groups or Line or whatever it is, and we're going to be sending you very erratic updates and messages, including at night.
Actually, you don't need to form the group. I think people already have enough groups.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Actually, it would be more random if they leave it open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sit with. Right, that's like you really just sit with your life at this moment, your digital life.
To deal with it the same way we hear a sound, we hear the thunder, we hear someone dropping the bowl in the Zendo, or someone opening the door and the door creaks, right? It's the mind.
Yes.
It's not the phone. It's not the digital platform. It's the mind, right? So maybe that's the kind of digital Dharma boot camp. We should organize this. Maybe digital Bodhisattva should organize this kind of event. So
the Techno Dharma.
Yeah, Techno Dharma retreat. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we could even. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'd be too intense to host it in the middle of a city. Maybe that'll be like the real. Like a hardcore retreat will be, okay, we're just going to be sitting in a city park with all of these noises as well.
So we can start with the Zazen sessions, once a week, and we don't bar my handphones from getting into the Zendo or the meditation hall, right? Yeah, bring them in, fine. Just watch it as you will watch any distraction, that arises in your mind during the session, right?
Yes. And I'm even thinking personally, like, many phones have the same notification sound, like for Messenger or whatever it is. So if somebody else's phone gets a message, like I know my mind will be like, is that my phone? I should check it. Oh no, I should. Maybe it's not my phone. And like there'd be all of these like layers of uh, extension or awareness that normally, you would purposefully be removing from your meditation environment. As like a basic thing. So this is definitely this is a maybe an evolution of practice or like an experiment in practice. Yeah, I'm excited.
The more traditional teachers will probably throw us out.
Yeah, well, fair
Yeah.
enough.
Well, then again, we will never know, right? The way Buddhism have evolved, it has adapted. It's about the only one of the very, very few world religions, in fact the only, if I know, that has adapted. That's all the different schools of practice is so diverse, from one another, and it interprets it so uniquely within their own culture and lifestyles, you see. So yeah, who knows, the more we raise these conversations, I think the more awareness, I think something may happen, you right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to practice.
Yeah. And maybe it's a good time to pull this discussion to an end.
For sure.
Again, it's nice to have a discussions like this, to explore what's happening in the digital economic world and bring it to, putting it together with our practice world and without going crazy, trying to see things as one and not be sucked in too much. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are my last words. Dexter, you can say your last words and we can wrap up the session for today.
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, for anyone listening, Digital Bodhisattva is all about having these conversations, and we were encouraging them at least every week. So join our clubhouse, and yeah, stay tuned. We've got lots of exciting, as you've heard, exciting things in the works, and it's a wonderful melting pot and platform for exploring these ideas. So all are welcome. Thanks for listening.
Bye bye.